G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope you're super well. Today we are shooting down at Docklands. We're under the Balti Bridge and we are trialling Pixel Shift, which of course first came on the ZF and now it is here on the Z8 with firmware 2.0. Is it going to work? Now we know that with Nikon's implementation that it does not remove moving objects like this yacht that you can probably see in the back of frame here. It doesn't do that. Nikon's implementation and I believe Canon's implementation is the same. We've got to work with objects and things that don't move at all. So still life, cityscapes, landscapes to a certain extent. And there's lots of other things like artwork and so on. Whereas Sony's implementation, its AI implementation actually takes into account moving objects. Now I've seen examples of that working. I've also seen examples of that not working. So it may well be a little while before we can do actual pixel shift and handle anything and everything that's going on in the scene. Or that may never happen, who knows. Today, what I want to show you is turning 45 megapixels into 180 megapixels, which is more than anyone really should ever need in most use cases, unless of course you're doing reproduction art. We're going to get into it. Z8, firmware 2.0. Thank you, Nikon. Z9 coming anytime soon? We hope so. Alrighty.
In this episode, we are going to see how this works in the field, a close-up look at the images in editing software, how to set up pixel shift on your camera, and how do you compile the images to be able to edit them. All of that and more in this episode. And what is pixel shift? Well, the name tells it all. It's the idea of moving your sensor a pixel, just a pixel at a time, and thus creating these composites that gives you the extra resolution and gives you the higher ISO and better color rendition performance. And literally the camera is physically using the in-body image stabilization system. It is moving the sensor around to cause this to happen. And then what we do in our software in the NX Studio is we combine it all together, which we will take a look at how that works later in this episode.
All right, so I'm deliberately taking a shot here with lots of people in it. Let's see how distorted they are.
We have this new file type, which is NEFX, X for extra large, I suppose, and it is 16,512 by 11,008 pixels. I've shot this image on the 85mm, 1.2, 1/800th of a second, ISO 64 on a tripod with a 2-second delay before we kick off. How do we set pixel shift up on our cameras? And it's the same for Z8 and ZF. We can find the pixel shifting menu in the photo shooting menu towards the end of that list. Once going in there, you choose to turn it on for a single photo, or it'll just keep taking photos until you come back in and turn it off. That's that selection there. And then we choose what do we want to do. With the 4-shot variant, we get shots that produce a picture with good color reproduction. With the 8-shot variant, we get shots that produce a picture with good color and noise reduction. 16 gives you high resolution and good color, and 32 gives you the best of everything. High resolution, good color, and less noise. You've got to work out what you want to do, but 16 and 32 is what gives you that 180 megapixels. From there, you choose the delay. Now, this is the delay from when you press the camera trigger to when it starts shooting. This is for you to get in position or to get something else in position or just simply to stop camera movement. And then finally, you're choosing the interval between the frames, the 4, the 8, the 16, or the 32. From my perspective, the best way to do this is to just shoot as fast as possible, so you have 0 delay between images. That way, the whole thing is completed as quickly as possible, which I think is the best way in most circumstances. What happens when things are moving? And look at this magic here. This weird pattern here, that is people moving. So there's a person there. We can also see an example of it here on the water. There it is there. There's another person who's been blown to pixels across multiple shots. The same person, of course, 32 images, more people here, footprints, and so on. We are at 100%, and these people are at a distance. But this is what you can expect to see when things are moving. Very weird pixel clusters. And it would be great if over time, this is something that is rectified. Now, this image has no moving people. None of this is going on here. No examples of it. This is at 50%. We'll go to 100%. The water is doing the same thing, but to be honest, I'm really not sure how much that is actually going to read. And I deliberately put the fence at this height to obscure the moving water. And looking at 100%, there's a lot of detail there in the Marvel Stadium sign. And this is it. This is what we're looking at, the immense amount of detail, and very, very clean. There is no noise here. Now, we're at base ISO, but I think it's even cleaner than normal base ISO. This is a 4K screen, 100%. If you had a 2K screen, 1080 screen, then you'd be at the equivalent of 200%. It would be filling the frame like that. Impressed. I'm very impressed.
What we're trying to do here is shoot the rail yard, but without any trains, so that we don't ruin the shot. We've now got a 2-second exposure, so I haven't done this before, but a 2-second exposure times 32, I suppose this will take 64 seconds. Ash will come in and show you the little green light once we get started, and you'll see it's taking each shot. We can probably count all 32. So once I hit this button, we've got a 2-second delay, then it starts shooting. Here we go. Green light. 2 seconds. There we go. That's 1, 2, 3, and on it goes. So the whole idea here is by doing 32 shots, we get better noise performance, and we get obviously 180 megapixels. This is a very stable tripod, although we are on a bridge. Potentially bridges do shake, but we're near the edge of the bridge, so hopefully the bridge won't shake. I don't feel it shaking. But we're getting through our 32. 1,000, 2,000, 1,000, 2,000, 1. Yep, it's 2 seconds. It's doing it. So, and we're looking good. And I don't think anything's moved out there. So unless this bridge is moving, we're going to have a beautiful night, 180 megapixel, very clean image. It's going to look absolutely amazing.
This is the image, deliberately underexposed the foreground to maintain as much of the highlights. There's obviously massive differentials between those hotspots and the most shadowed and dark areas. And we're not going to be able to cover absolutely everything. But what I want to show you here is not only is there an immense amount of resolution, 16,000 by 11,000 pixels, that's so much. Z8, firmware 2, we're on the 50mm 1.2 at 2.8. I could probably happily shoot this at f11 or f8. And next time I do this, I might. But that's okay. We're playing, we're experimenting. And there is actually nothing wrong with getting short depth of field at 180 megapixels if that's what you want to get. Not everything is about getting everything in focus. But what I most want to show you here is what we were looking at before, 100%, and how hard you can push these files. I am pushing that 4 stops, and there is no sign at all of noise. Now, my focus is not here in the foreground. The focus is back further. Somewhere in this vicinity, we can see. But just to give you a sense of how hard that's been pushed, we do not need to push it any harder, but we can. And there is still, we can look everywhere. There is no sign of noise whatsoever, and that is what the 32 frames gives you. Noise reduction, 180 megapixels, 4 times the megapixel count of your original file of your camera. Let's bring this back down and make it actually look good. which is subjective. Everybody has a different vibe. Let's do something like, why not a bit of extra contrast? And there we have a really interesting image. Now remember, we're only at f2.8, so yes, the background is starting to fall out of focus. Not a lot of movement. The only thing moving in this image are these flags. And this shows you the only downside of doing this sort of image, unless the trees and the wind were blowing. And then that would be difficult as well also. Otherwise, this is a great shot. That level of noise reduction and that level of just individual pixel quality is so high. It's sort of almost 100% clean, even when you push it 4 whole stops, which is pretty ridiculous. Now, what that means, what that says to me is you could actually preserve these highlights more by going down probably another stop or 2, because this is way overexposed. I mean, I'm not even using the exposure to get my exposure to the right point. I'm just pushing the shadows. And thus it's arguable we could bring that down. We could bring down the exposure more. And this really promotes a different way of shooting, or it promotes an exaggerated way of shooting, when normally we would shoot and maybe to preserve the highlights, you drop down a stop or 2 and you're comfortable with that if you're shooting base ISO or something maybe 3 or 4 times that, not 12,000 ISO because that's high. Does this mean we could shoot sort of 4 stops almost below what we think is roughly correct and still get a clean image? That is something that I will need to test. Let me know in the comments below if that's something you'd be interested in.
Fabulous. Everybody say hi to Ash. Ash, say hi to everybody. Okay. So, what we're doing here, everybody, is this is the final shot. We're getting into a laneway. We've just found a beautiful orange Vespa, and hopefully we're going to make a beautiful 32 shot, 180 megapixel image right here, right now. What's interesting is when I first started shooting nightscapes, which was the very first time I think I went out and did a nightscape was 1985. So we are talking almost 40 years ago. And we had to use tripods. And then in the modern era, I've been able to do night shooting without tripods. But we're back to tripods because we're doing these multiple exposures. And that's kind of a bit fun in a way. Now, people, does it make sense to do a 180 megapixel file at f1.2? I think we need to make a whole video to talk about when do you need 180 megapixels? And at the end of the day, I don't really want to tell you when you need it. It's a discussion. This is a discussion about when any of us might need it. In 2007, I was using my Nikon D3 12 megapixels, and on my Epson 9800, no, not the 9800, the 11880, I was printing 64-inch canvases, which is over 2 meters, from 12 megapixels. When do we need it? It's a very interesting question. And now I have a person, which is what I did not want. Lots of people. Just waiting on background. All right, here we go. We are shooting 1/4 of a second, f1.2, ISO 64, getting ready to do a 32 shot exposure. Here it is. Boom. There you go, going much faster because it's 1/4 of a second. So 1/4 of a second times 32, we get 4. That's going to take 8 seconds. Not bad. Not much is going to happen in 8 seconds, and I reckon we're going to get away with it. Now, there's some people very, very small in the frame in the background, moving slightly out of focus. I don't think they're going to read.
0.4 of a second, ISO 64 on the 50mm. Again, this is 180 megapixels, the enormous amount of information that we have. But this is still a full raw file. This is what's beautiful about Nikon's implementation. I don't know how other brands do it, but I am now in my photo editing software of choice, which is Capture One, and I still have full control as I normally would. And as we talked about, these files are very clean. I'm now pushing this file as hard as possible, which is a ridiculous amount. You'd never ever want to push anything this hard, but it's all still so clean and fantastic. Now, don't worry about sharpness when you look here, because I was focused here on this blinker and we're at f1.2 and I'm probably only 3 or 4 meters, 10 to 12 feet from this object. I am pushing this file as hard as I can, shadows and exposure. It is not falling apart. It is not moving. It is all here. That is extraordinarily impressive to me, who's done so much of this type of photography, and to, in post, have this level of latitude along with this level of resolution. The only thing that adds a little bit of extra time over my current workflow is the tripod, but I've been using tripods for, well, decades, so no big deal. And that's how I used to have to shoot. Okay, so how do we actually create the NEFX file? Well, here we're in NX Studio looking at my CF Express Type B card. And I'm going to show you a way to create the NEFX file without actually having to load all 32 images onto your hard drive. We're simply looking at the card, and then you press up here in the top right the Pixel Shift Merge button. And what it does is it scans the entire card looking for anything that's tagged as a pixel shift image. We can see it's appeared here. So we scroll down and we look for the image that we're wanting to create. And this is the one that I'm wanting to do here. That's what we're going to do. We can turn chromatic aberration correction on, and there are a few other options, naming and so on. We're just going to run with what's standard. We press start. Now I'm working on an MX Studio M2 Max. It's a very fast machine, 64 gig of RAM. It's hard to know how optimized NX Studio is for working with this machine. But let's keep in mind what we're doing here right now is we're pulling 32 images off the card, and that takes time itself along with the actual merging process, which I'd love to know what's actually going on there with those 32 images. So yes, it does take a minute perhaps. We're about to see this come to an end pretty soon, I think. But the quality of the files is extraordinary, and we're about to see that. We will open it in Capture One. Okay, let's now grab that file. We're going to import it. 16,000 by 11,000 pixels. This is a raw, lossless, compressed, taken with the Z8 version 2 firmware. And down the bottom here, of course, we can see it's an NEFX file. One of the most extraordinary aspects of this file type is this. 4 stops, absolutely dragged as far as we can drag it. And we look over here in this shadow area, there are details starting to appear, and there is absolutely no noise at all. Amazing to me. This 32 shot variant, it gives us no noise. The extraordinary Nikon colors that look so beautiful and so natural are still absolutely there. Nothing has changed. We're getting 180 megapixels. And of course, the ZF does the same thing, giving us 96 megapixel files. It makes it an extraordinarily powerful camera when you consider the price point of $19.99 US, and with certain use cases you can get almost 100 megapixel files out of that camera. It's extraordinary. Next time we'll do this with the ZF. And something that I've talked about before, and I will say it here again, is just how extraordinary it is to me that somehow with a mix of the Nikon colors and the Nikon optics with the Z mount, it really is getting extraordinarily close to a medium format rendition. It still blows my mind. This is truly extraordinary. And now you've just got to work out when and how best to implement it. But if you want super duper ridiculously high quality shots with zero noise and resolution to burn, unbelievable. And the other thing to keep in mind is, and we'll just jump over to here, this is the shoot, and I loaded all of the images that make up. They're still just, obviously they're still just normal raw files. And what's even more exciting on top of that is we're using high efficiency star. So this is a file, 60% of a normal raw file for the Nikon system, but you still get all the advantages of pixel shift. It's quite a juggle. This is quite a balancing act of technology, file size, and just absolute image fidelity. But if we look at just one, this is just one of these images, one of the 32, NEX image on the left, regular image on the right. We are now going to look at them together for noise, mostly, noise reduction. Firstly, we will zoom in here. Now, this is 67% on the pixel shift image, and we're at 133. All right, watch what happens here. we'll go in another step. 200% that there is way more noise, way less information, way more noise on the non-pixel shift image. So it really does make a big difference to noise. And there is it's very clear, the noise differential in this area. It is so smooth. This is genuine, real image quality happening in camera, in the sense that you're capturing it in the moment and then you're compiling it, and we haven't done any noise reduction as such. Although you could argue that multi-shot is a type of noise reduction. But what I like about this implementation is you're doing it in real time. It's very quick to implement it. If your exposure is something like 1/15 of a second, this whole thing is over in 4 or 5 seconds. In this case, it's almost half a second. So it's taking 15 seconds to compile this whole image into the camera. It's really not very long at all. And I am very impressed by that outcome. What also is interesting about this compilation is these people were moving, and I'd have to say that's not too distracting. And I also think this is something that we can actually fix quite easily in post. So what we're going to do is export this just as a high-res JPEG. That'll do for now. You could do it as a TIFF or a PSD file. It would be absolutely enormous. But for this test, we won't bother, but we will push the quality to maximum. Bring those highlights down a little bit so we can get a bit more of the color in the background there. Bring this down a smidge. Great. Export. We're in Photoshop now, and nothing else moved in this image. Nothing moved except this area here. Look, it's maybe a little distracting. Let's feather selection, and let's feather it about 10. And then we are going to blur. It's very easy to fix those pixels, and there we are there. That's about enough. Actually hasn't changed it that much, except for that bit there, but that's okay. That's the difference. I think that's a great solution in an out of focus area. I could probably work out solutions for other areas. There it is, ready to fly at 180 megapixels. Look at that beast. And if you wanted to print that at 300 DPI, let's see how big we can get. Okay, so this could be 55 inches or 1.4 meters. Now, I can tell you, you don't need to print at 300 DPI when you're that big. Let's see where 180 DPI takes it. We don't want to resample the image. We want to leave it pixel for pixel. So that's why you turn resample off. We go to 180 and then we ask it, what is that in centimeters? And it's 2.3 meters. What is that in inches? 91 inches. And that is more than enough. 180 DPI at probably something like 12 to 24 inches, 36 inches. You're standing a meter away because this thing is 91 inches wide. It's enormous. You just don't need any more resolution. Pixel shift in the Z era is very exciting, and we've seen here you get amazing outcomes, and the implementation both in camera and at the post end of things is actually pretty simple and straightforward. And to me, probably the most compelling part of all of this is at the end of the day, you still have a RAW file that behaves exactly like a RAW file. It's just enormous. It's 180 megapixels or 96 megapixels with the ZF. I'm very impressed by this, and really the only next step is how do we deal with objects, items, people, animals, foliage that moves. This is something that's already being addressed by Sony, and it's only a matter of time before I believe the other manufacturers move in this direction. Other future things that I can see is the fact that we get pixel shift handheld. That would also be super exciting. And of course, the Z9 and whatever else Z cameras are coming. Hopefully they all get, especially the mid to top end of cameras, I hope they all get pixel shift. And quite frankly, I hope they all get pixel shift. I think this is a really great addition to the photographer's toolkit. I'd love to know what you think of pixel shift. Would you like me to explore it more? Any questions that you have, please let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about it. It's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again, so please do subscribe, please share, and please like. Bye for now.